Good day, everyone. I'm Good day, everyone. I'm Art Samaniego, cybersecurity advocate and technology editor of the Manila Bulletin. I'm happy to be your moderator for this morning. In this event, we'll learn about how collective defense can tackle, contain, and reduce cybercrime. To officially start today's event, giving the welcome remarks is Ms. Amor Maclang, Executive Director of the FinTech Philippines Association, the largest financial technology trade association in the country. Amor is also the convener of Digital Pilipinas, the movement that addresses prevailing social and business challenges through the adoption of technology. Amor?
Hello, sir. Magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. I wrote a very short speech which I entitled, "And Just Like That," right? It's the end of 2021, well, almost. And just over the weekend, we were greeted with news of pervasive cyber attacks on a leading financial institution. Although deplorably, there have been many attacks on many banks in general, and perhaps many of them go unreported. This really was most prominent because the institution is considered a DeFi, not decentralized finance, no, domestically important financial institution. What does that mean? Well, essentially it means it's too big to fail. I thought we had ended the year with a bang last December, and I was willing to just wait it out till the end of the year. We had a year-end party, complete with, alcohol and drinks and food, which is how we like to party in the technology and the fintech space. It was so appropriately titled, "The New Champions of Open Finance in the Country." However, as we move into this era of open finance, one thing becomes absolutely clear, that we will only be stronger when we work together. Cybersecurity and cyber defense is a whole of nation and a whole of society concern. If you don't believe me, just look at our adversaries. Black hat hackers working in groups. There are states who treat hacking like a branch of the military or foreign intelligence. Do you really think that we can survive this as individual actors? Yes, we have data privacy to consider, and one of the pillars, and definitely a founding father in data privacy in the country, is here with us. But sharing our security issues will allow us to learn and adapt much faster. And that's the key, because when it comes to security, we are never going to be done. The world will change with increasing speed, and the only prayer we have of keeping peace at this space is admitting to ourselves that we can't do it alone. In an open finance and a very digitally connected economy, when one of us is victimized by cybercrime, all of us are victimized. We need to stop blaming the victims, blaming ourselves, pointing fingers at institutions, and unite against these bad actors and criminals who think that ingenuity excuses the immorality of their actions. As we come together, we will discover new allies. White hat hackers, for example, who find and report weaknesses will be recognized now not as threats, but as defenders of our economy. Advocates, the academe, and even the media. Rival companies will realize that collective security is not a field for competition, but for collaboration. That the only real shame is not being a victim of hacking, but hiding the details so the rest of us can't learn how to properly defend ourselves. Some are concerned that they will be seen as, negligent if they report, but negligence is only possible if there is wide public discussion about what are well-established remediable risks. New criminal innovations are not the sign of corporate weakness. Being unwilling to share the information with the public in the spirit of transparency is. As many of you are aware, we have been placed, and this is an ongoing advocacy for me and for all of us in Digital Pilipinas and in FinTech Philippines Association, and I think for MB Tech News also. Last June 2021, we have been placed on the FATF gray list for being high risk for money laundering and financial crimes. Allow me to state the uncomfortable but irrefutable truth. If we in the Philippines are on the gray list, it means that you are on the gray list. Yes, you. It's a very broad brush they paint with. The FATF does not distinguish between those who are defended and those who are vulnerable. Because in this new era of technological interdependence, there are no safe houses in unsafe neighborhoods. If we are truly committed to progress, let's do more than just adopt new technologies. Let's also cancel culture out these antiquated ideas about security that make us individually weak and in the dark. In behalf of FinTech Philippines Association, the largest and most inclusive FinTech trade association in the country and the official partner of the Singapore FinTech Festival here in the Philippines, of course, in behalf of the Manila Bulletin Tech News, led by the consumer advocate, Mr. Art Samaniego, and a really, really dear friend. In behalf of the Digital Pilipinas movement, the whole of nation and whole of society approach to solving the problems of our country through technology, convened by both the governments of Singapore and the Philippines and the largest technology and financial institutions here and in the region, we would like to thank all of you who responded to this invite. We are 184 people. And guess what? We were just officially able to get this out last night. And to all of those who are watching on the FinTech Philippines platform, the Digital Pilipinas platform, and also the MB Tech News platform, we would like to thank all of you today. And we look forward to having you in our movement to tech up the country. Mabuhay po ang Pilipinas at mabuhay po ang Digital Pilipinas.
Maraming salamat, Amor. A strong cyber defense is required if our businesses and our economy are to remain safe from cyber criminals. And in providing that safety, cybersecurity can make our companies more progressive and our economy stronger. It can also be inferred that cybersecurity goes hand in hand with open finance, which Amor mentioned earlier. It has its slew of advantages na pwede natin magamit. Let us all remember that our event today speaks of a collective or a more unified kind of cyber defense that protects and shields not just one organization, but many. Our esteemed group of panelists are industry leaders in these areas. Their expertise and knowledge can show us how we can ably defend ourselves, our companies, our communities, and our country from cyber criminals. Knowing all that and implementing it would be a good way to start the new year. Magagamit din natin to ngayong holiday when many of us are inclined to spend the most. Now let us all welcome our distinguished list of panelists. Our first panelist is the forefront of data privacy. His programs and policies have ensured that many of our companies and their customers are protected from data breaches which could compromise their confidential data. He has also been keen in educating all the stakeholders to ensure that they are up to speed up in protecting all private information that is stored up in their IT systems. Let us all welcome former Commissioner Raymond Liboro of the National Privacy Commission. Now we can call him Citizen Mon, who will share his expertise about data privacy and security. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Art, and thank you, Amor. I'm wondering, when you said that we are promoting that companies spend, is that a slip? Or how to speed up?
They could
Right.
speed up, yeah.
But in both ways, right? That should be the direction. No, but let me on that later. But thank you again. Thank you for the correct introduction, ladies and gentlemen. I could not miss this event for the world. But let me just, I was introduced as the former privacy commissioner, and that's very accurate. I have served my full term. I was appointed in the early part of 2016 for a 3-year term. I was extended by the president. So it's almost up, yes, and a new privacy commissioner has been appointed, right? And we're all excited with this new stage of development and existence for the National Privacy Commission.
And welcome, sir, for being now the Citizen Mon.
Yes, and I thought, and coming here, ladies and gentlemen, I've had some reservations, but then again, I realized again that an advocacy knows no bounds, right? And it should not be bound by positions or roles or designations, but we should continue again pushing through, even in whatever capacity, because really that is what is being called upon us.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. We'll talk about that.
Thank you to all our panelists. But really, the recent incident about this these incidents involving the Banco de Oro account is a forceful reminder that information and cybersecurity are really primordial considerations now as businesses shift services into digital. I mean, heists involving the financial sector, not novel, right? But it has always been ever present. But it has evolved really from the physical heist to now highly technical, technological, and systematic attacks that seeks to exploit vulnerabilities in human beings and in the banking system. So really, Art, the adage that we have always been aware of is that the adage of it's no longer a question of is it possible, meaning cybersecurity and breaches will happen. Rather, when will it happen, right? So it's already holding. So
yes, sir. Thank you very much. We'll talk about that more later.
Right.
We have a lot of questions. We have a lot of questions about that later.
So,
yes, sir.
So yun lang yung aking,
Yes, sir.
And ito ba introduction pa lang ba to?
Yes,
Art?
sir. We have a lot of questions for you later. We need to
All right, so let me start by
proceed. Yes, sir.
giving that intro. Okay, Art? All right.
Thank you, sir. Moving on to our next panelist, we are joined by Attorney Arvin Rason, Director for Legal Compliance and Regulatory Affairs of Brancas. Attorney Rason specializes in banking and financial technology law. As the Director for Legal Compliance and Regulatory Affairs of Brancas, he will further strengthen and develop its legal and compliance framework, continuing the pioneering contribution of Brancas to the region as a leader in open finance. Attorney Arvin earned his bachelor's degree magna cum laude, as well as his Juris Doctor degrees from the University of the Philippines and his Master of Laws from the University of Melbourne. Let us all welcome Attorney Arvin Rason. Attorney.
Hi, Art. Thank you for the introduction and good morning, everyone. I would just like to congratulate and thank Digital Pilipinas for putting this forum together in light of the recent incidents, some say dating back to May 2021. Open finance can, ironically, some people would say, provide key guidance on how to navigate this issue. So the tenets of open finance, collaboration, transparency, and institutional courage from the domestically systemic important banks can actually help us navigate this issue, of course, with the guidance of institutions like the BSP and the National Privacy Commission. So I'm excited to be here today.
Thank you, Attorney. Moving on to our next panelist, let's welcome Mr. Nichelle Gaba, founder and CEO of the Philippine Digital Asset Exchange, or PDAX. Prior to founding PDAX, Nichelle's career focused in the financial markets, in banking, asset management, trust, and security services. Now, as a leader of PDAX, he has made it his mission to make financial services safer and more accessible to his fellow Filipinos, especially in the digital space. The organization constantly and responsibly utilizes technology to build better products and services. Let us all welcome Mr. Nichelle Gaba. Sir, magandang
Thank you very
umaga.
much, Art, for that kind introduction. I'm certainly very happy to be here. You know, throughout human history, the best results have come from man and machine working together. Now we just have to learn how to protect ourselves and operate these machines or these tech innovations safely. So I'm very happy to be part of this panel this morning.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Now, let's go on to the discussion. We have a first question here for Citizen Mon, former Commissioner Mon Liboro. Sir, the NPC is pushing for the amendment of the Data Privacy Act to keep up with the changing times. Among its provision is to introduce administrative fines para daw mapalakas yung accountability among personal information controllers or PIC. Based on your experience, sir, how much protection would you say the existing Data Privacy Act offers the consumers?
Well, let me say, Art, that ours is a very comprehensive law. It is being admired really globally as a comprehensive law, and meaning it applies to both government and the private sector. But when it was introduced in 2012, ours was considered the most punitive. So because it introduced the element of imprisonment and fines, right? And some industries, you know, they would come out, will go to town, brandishing this and throwing cases left and right. But you see, the the overall thrust of any law is to build resilience, resilience for industry so that they can be trusted, resilience for industry so that they can withstand assaults and attacks like the one that we just experienced these past few weeks, because I'm also counting this context. art, which we also talked about early, when it was still very early during that time. But and it's an administrative fines is a way to basically to be a deterrent and exact accountability from organizations. So it's a middle ground, right? Where instead of fearing the imprisonment, then probably this would nudge you a bit into being accountable. So the fining system is not new globally; it's being practiced. It's really the imprisonment that is quite novel. So really, for us, with that again, we can accept accountability from organizations where they don't need to land in jail. So meaning some accountable processes like having a data protection officer, or and very most importantly, coming up with appropriate security measures will be considered. So it's always we always consider whether to balance or strike that equilibrium between over deterrence and under deterrence. And this is just a tool. Let me just remind everyone here, this is just one of the tools. Okay, so don't lose sleep over this. Many of the companies here present are I think they're on their journeys in their with their respective compliance journeys. This will all be considered, right? This will all be considered. So this is again part of the evolution of a regime, of a privacy regime that seeks the exact accountability from organizations. So the companies here, I suppose, and I'm confident, are not really in the crosshairs of this amendment. Thank you, Art.
Sir, merong dito, may dalawang tanong para sa iyo ulit.
Sige.
Sige. Under the current Data Privacy Act, how safe are Philippine companies and customers from cybercrimes? Inyong una. Pangalawa, follow-up question niya. How do we ensure that perpetrators of cybercrimes are tracked and sanctioned? Yan, sir.
Very good question. This forum, and again, the objectives of Digital Pilipinas, and you, Art, you've been such an advocate all this time. Ikaw ang original idol ko. But yun po, no? The law puts in place policies. That's what governments do. That's really, I mean, there are only two things that governments do. We provide yan. So when we protect, we protect physically and now digitally. And whenever there are risks, threats, and harms, we enact laws. That's why ito ngayon relevant dito sa type of debt. Ang operational dyan is the NDRRMC law, right? Which requires now all barangays to have the disaster officers. Ganun din po ang laws ng Privacy Act, ang Cybercrime Prevention Act, no? And then the DICT creation, and then the CICC. So again, government puts in place a legal framework, a legal where we can all stand on. And this should now trigger the whole of society approach. So we have those tools in place. The trifecta of laws had been enacted. And again, this really augured well for the country. I mean, right now, the way we're advancing cybersecurity and privacy, I would say, is still way ahead of other jurisdictions in the region. And this has been recognized. Even our cybersecurity posture has been recognized. But here comes now this problem. So what I'm trying to say is that we have the legal framework and policies in place. Of course, we can always do sensitive reviews and come up with better way to enhance, distill further these laws. It's an never-ending process. But this should not trigger the ecosystem with you there, media, with the companies here, right, and the academe even, because we need to innovate, we need to conduct researches and R&Ds together with the brand. Now is the time. Now more than ever is the time, and we should be confident in our efforts because again, the enabling policies are here. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So another question for you. But before I ask you this question, ito yung nangyayari. People may think that NPC is not doing anything kasi di nila nakikita lagi. But under your leadership, sir, I am a witness of that, na even before some cyber attacks and breaches happen, your quick reaction team are already working on it. Di ba? So hindi nila alam. Kaya ang question dito, how closely does NPC monitor companies to ensure that they are conforming to the mandates of the Data Privacy Act?
Thank you for that, Art. But sabi ko nga, hindi lang nila alam. That's what's really keeping us awake at night, right? And even weekends, no? Ganun po, not yung po mga kaibigan. So here, ang NPC, sa NPC, we have crafted what we call a responsive regulatory framework. So within that, I mean, mahirap lang but really the foremost is really building resilience for our stakeholders, and that are the companies, what we call controllers and processors, diba? And we build data privacy resilience by coming up with the right policies, providing the correct advice, giving timely information, guidance, engaging with the stakeholders, and coming up with standards, right? So that is really the preventive and mitigating. We took a risk management approach. So we are really for the promotion of prevention and mitigation. Tama-tama talaga itong nangyayari. Ilang bagyo itong dumadaan sa atin, itong isang bagyo ng cyber at yung natural na bagyo. But really, again, that is again a very good example, right? Because hindi naman tayo pwedeng mawala sa typhoon belt at the ring of fire, right? Pero hindi naman dapat na lahat ng risks will turn into disasters. And we can prevent that from happening by building privacy resilience. Ganun din lang po. Pareho lang yung prinsipyo sa pag-iwas ng casualty sa bagyo. So ito po, and we have a better chance at cyber issues, Art, because privacy and cyber risks are man-made. They can be prevented. They can be mitigated. Right? So yun po yung ating dito po sa NPC. So pag hindi ho namin nakuha sa resilience, meaning sa policy, sa advice, at yan po ay nauwi sa mga kumpanyang pabaya, right? O hindi na iintindihan, and then we have to demand or exact compliance, and we monitor compliance. So we are conducting privacy sweeps among companies every month. We've been increasing our work rate when it comes to privacy. What do we mean by privacy sweeps? So we do yung mga publicly available ninyo, sa companies here present, we take a look at them. Tinitingnan namin, are there signs? Specifically, pag nakikita namin yung mga privacy notices nyo are flawed, then that is already a red flag. Kasi, and then we look for the data protection officer. Pag wala, hindi registered sa amin yan, another flag, another red flag. Okay? So we do a lot of this. And we issue compliance and warning letters to companies, and many, probably, I'm sure in your audience right now, some companies have received that. So pag hindi pa rin nakuha doon sa compliance, this is really again where now nagtitrigger yung aming tier 3, and now it's really about addressing complaints and enforcement. So complaints, yan ang intel namin . Diba? Pag marami nagko-complaint halimbawa dito sa online lending application, and we look at it, diba? It is because companies did not comply. Companies are not educated. Right? So doon nauuwi sa complaints. And that is what we're trying to prevent. Okay? We have a group within the NPC, let me tell you this. It's a 24/7 group, survivor. We call it the Privacy Panic Group. So everything that we gather on a daily basis, pinag-uusapan kaagad ng aming teams. And then we determine ano bang intervention ang kailangan gawin dito. kung makukuha lang ito halimbawa sa policy, then we refer it to our policy team to come up with the right policies. Baka advice lang ang kailangan ito. But once ito na nga, no, ito na yung mga smoke signals pag nakikita na namin na yung complaints, no? Yan. So very classic ito. We had a very huge issue of online lending a year ago. Nakikita mo yung spike ng complaints. So you now understand, now you realize that you're dealing with an industry that is not resilient, right? Or even baka talagang patently trying to evade the law, no? So we do that. So this is a very it's not it's called maximizing our results by regulation, our battles. We look at incidents, for example, if it's large scale, then we really throw our attention and resources to that. So when SNR came out, a large scale, ganon. Ito rin nangyari sa huli, no? Dito tayo hindi nakakatulog. Dito kami hindi nakakatulog ng NTC. Kasama ka na rin Art. No? But this is again, I thought that in the last 6 years, we have on how to intervene. So mas makikita po ninyong lahat yan as the NPC again develops. So kung ano sabihin wala kaming ginagawa, ano lang po, pasensya na po, no? Kami ang pinakabatang regulator sa Pilipinas ngayon, pero no excuses actually, but we're all trying our best. Thank you.
Okay, sir. Thank you po. Now let's move on to Attorney Arvin Rason. Sir, why is it important to talk about open finance now? And why are you suggesting collaboration among industry players, especially when it comes to cybersecurity?
Yes. So yung open finance framework was based on the open finance regulations issued by the BSP last June 2021. So it's a mandate that actually came from them. And I understand that they have already collaborated with the NTC in the issuance of this framework. So this is something that's actually happening. So what does it mean? It means open finance players, businesses, technologies talking to each other using a common language, right? So that they are able to provide financial services to those who are underserved, yung mga wala pang bank account, right? And even to develop new financial products and services. So we can rely on open finance para magkaroon tayo ng mga bagong produkto that will eventually lead to financial development, right? Kung ano pa yung mga posibilidad na hindi limitado sa deposit accounts, hindi limitado sa loans or insurance products, or even insurance products. How do we get them to people who don't know them yet, who don't have them yet, right? So yun yung essence ng open finance, and definitely it's important. But now, nagkakaroon ng question, how will open finance be furthered considering these recent incidents, right? And kaya naman namin ina-advocate yung more information, more transparency. Kasi right now, you know, consumers always get these notifications, right, from leading institutions, from our banking partners, where they say na wag makiklik ng mga phishing links, wag makiklik ng SMS. But what does it really mean, right? And I think consumers, I'm sure you know this, Art, consumers are finally able to understand now, ano ba yung nangyayari if I do that, right? I guess yun yung missing message, right? Ano ba yung bigger picture here? And with more information, people will be more comfortable to continue doing their transactions. And we see this happening right now, right? On Facebook, Art, you're talking to a lot of the recent victims. They're talking about what happened to them. Now there's a need to collaborate and to centralize all this information, right? To form a common narrative as to what exactly happened. And that's why open finance comes into the picture, right? Open finance essentially means collaborating with each other, being more transparent, and basically putting all our brilliant heads together, which is already what hackers are doing, right? They're, as Amor said in the introduction, they are ingeniously trying to find ways to get our money. Pero what's happening now on the consumer and financial institution side? We need to band together. We need to understand what's happening. And there are so many brilliant people on the open finance side, on the financial institution side, that if only we have enough information, if only we know what's going on, right, we can find a solution that's not only preventive, but also proactive and preventive.
Attorney, pero may mga tao kasing nagdududa about these things, lalo na sa digital banking.
Yes.
So, yung iba, they even considering to go back to doing branch banking exclusively.
Yeah.
So how can we restore their confidence, especially after the incident that happened over the weekend?
I think, Art, we can safely say for now that there's no going back. Digital banking is here to stay. And the fact that you conducted transactions sa Shopee, sa Lazada, 12, that's already open finance. That's already digital banking. And we know that the things that we find on, the things that we purchase online are sometimes even 10 times cheaper, right, than what we could purchase in retail stores. So there's no question about it. Digital banking is here to stay. But the question is, what can we do to ensure that these things don't happen again? And that's why we go back to the spirit of open finance, which is more transparency and more information, having that bigger picture. Wag mo lang sabihin na don't do this, don't do that, right? Which is usually what we tell our kids, di ba? Pero now we need to understand ano ba talaga yung nangyayari behind the scenes. And I think we have very proactive regulators like the NPC and BSP who are coming to that situation, right? And also another thing that we have to understand, these third-party players, these people in the open finance space, they're actually the ones who help advance cybersecurity, right? Because obviously, these are developments that can be left only to the specialists, right? To the vendors who actually know how to develop this. Because financial institutions, they have so many compliance requirements, and they even look to outsourcing service providers who will help them develop cybersecurity. So definitely, this is the time to work together more and to collaborate together, right? And all throughout, obviously, the underlying context in there is to understand, for the people involved and also for the consumers, how is my personal data being protected? That's always the most important question. And that's thankfully one of the pillars in the open finance framework that was issued by the BSP in its open finance framework regulations.
The recent incident involving BD attorney, what do you think really happened, and how they can safeguard themselves from similar incident in the future? Yun yung mga tanong ng tao, ano ba talagang yung nangyari?
So obviously, we are talking here about what happened in December. And as you know, some people say back in November and May, we don't understand kasi ano ba talaga yung nangyari, ano ba yung common narrative. And that's why we called for more information and more transparency if it doesn't compromise the highly confidential and proprietary information. But based on the publicly available information, ito yung mga themes na nakita namin, right? There are 4 security layers that are applicable for us to be more comfortable doing banking transactions. And we all know this, right? Kaya medyo comfortable tayo, right, to do banking transactions using our mobile banking apps because we know that there are online banking credentials. Pero hindi enough yun, right, for us to be able to continue doing financial transactions. We also need the OTP. And the OTP is generated real time, is only valid for a limited period of time. The OTP applies not only for logging into the app, but also for actually facilitating or conducting the transaction. And then there are also the user-controlled or self-imposed limits, meaning I will not allow transactions to be facilitated beyond 50,000 pesos for that day only. And fourth of all, there's the notifications, which confirm that a transaction has either been successful or has failed to come through. So what happened here, based on publicly available information and testimonials of people who have come forward with highly detailed accounts of what happened, right, would be either one, it's a highly coordinated scam, right, which requires the presence of hackers on every step of the process, right? So very elaborate yung nangyari, and that would have entailed a lot of resources on the part of hackers, obviously, right? So meaning they not only generated the online banking credentials, at the point of the generation of the OTP, they were able to add the device. And this happened not only for one. Kasi kung isa lang yan, medyo madaling gawin yun for hackers. This happened all at the same time within a limited period of time, right? From 11 p.m. to 3 a.m. So you can deduce already the resources that would have been required for that to happen, right? And if that's the case, then this is something that has not happened before. At least as I'm aware of. The second, so we talked about the online mobile banking app. Meron bang hacking or incident involving the consumer-facing app? But second, we also need to understand that there's what we call the IT infrastructure or the core banking system. And the explanation here is that there was a circumvention right at the source of where the account information is. And some people even say, Art, you know this, right? Na some people didn't even have online banking accounts, but they were registered. So in other words, it's also possible that from the core banking system or the IT infrastructure, there were interceptors. There were obviously very, very bad actors who were able to turn off right? The controls, right, that would have made it impossible to conduct transactions at real time. So yun yung nakikita nating dalawang likely scenarios.
I'm taking notes. Ang dami kong natutunan dun sa sagot mong yun. Thank you very much. Tapos,
Thank you.
Attorney, based on your experience with open finance in other countries,
Mhm.
ano yung mga impact niya sa economy, business, and the customer? Would the same thing happen if this technology, open finance, becomes mainstream in the Philippines?
Yeah, so we're very optimistic, right, about the prospects of open finance. This is something that has been rolled out in more developed economies like the UK, Australia, and in the US. And we see the effect of this, right? People don't look at financial services just for their deposit accounts or their payment accounts. They're also looking at the other possibilities. Like, how can I make registration, right, for an account easier so that I don't have to share my information with all the institutions? Isa na lang yung isa-sign upan ko, and because of open finance, that will allow the facilitation based on my consent, right, on who I want to share that to, right? So that I don't have my information sitting in several servers, right, across different companies. So isa yun. And the other one would be financial products and services that are very relevant to them. So I'm thinking about even the concept of crop insurance for those farmers, right, in the provinces, and how open finance can actually enable that. Ang sabi nga namin, as long as we are able to reach people, right, who don't have access to financial services through open finance, then the work is already halfway done.
Galing. Nice one. So, as the presence of online technology continues to revolutionize the daily lives of Filipinos, how well are tech companies able to keep up with the need to protect the consumers?
Ang naiisip ko dito yung concept of reasonably foreseeable threats and advanced persistent threats. These are terms that are found in the BSP regulations and the NPC regulations. So again, let's leave it to the specialists. Open finance players, cybersecurity developers, and firms that actually employ white hat hackers, or that actually know what to do in order to get a step ahead of the game, but at the same time, they need information, they need transparency. And it's good, right, that there's consumer activism in play already, as long as they don't share highly sensitive personal information about themselves. It's good kasi nagkakaroon tayo ng information on which to base our products and services on. Ano pa ba yung kailangan i-develop? How can we help each other in order to foster a culture where we talk about these things and don't sweep them under the rug? Don't keep this in an individualistic manner, because that really doesn't solve the situation. Hackers are already talking about this behind the scenes among each other, and that's why they're a step ahead of the game sometimes.
Attorney, ang dami pang tanong para sa iyo, but I need to move on. Maybe
yes, thank you.
Or maybe we'll have more time at the end. Now I would like to ask Mr. Gaba. Sir.
Yes,
I have a question here. Sabi niya, in a country where the word investing is perceived to be intimidating and deemed only for the rich, pang mayaman lang yan, sabi nila yung investing daw. How does PDAX try to eradicate this mindset and encourage even ordinary Filipinos to invest? Yun yung first question niya. Follow-up question, how do you answer concerns when it comes to privacy risk and possible breach of data, especially because crypto is an open source system? Mr. Gaba.
Napakaganda ng questions, Art. Well, sa first one, ang investments pang mayaman lang. Now, what's interesting is a lot of these notions, they don't come from nowhere, right? The reason why we believe that investing is only for the rich is because largely, historically, it was only accessible to the rich, right? It's so hard to open bank accounts. It's so hard for people in the countryside to access investment products. So historically, it has been for the rich. Pero now, we have the technology to make investment products much more accessible. Cryptocurrencies and actually blockchain technology, which powers cryptocurrencies, is a very integral part of the solution. We're starting to embrace that, right? We're making investment products more accessible. Now, the question is, do we have enough learning opportunities out there from credible sources that can help us access these investment products, not just readily, no, but also safely and in a manner that grows wealth rather than perpetuates fraud. Okay. With regards to the second question, I think there's there's some misconception here about open source, or maybe I'm speaking in general terms, no, but like the open architecture of financial services as something that is actually a source of security risk. I would actually flip that around, no? The very fact that we do not have open finance standards is what's introducing risks. Why is it that Bank A authenticates users just using an email address and a password? Tapos si Bank B uses email password with a small security device, right? Tapos Bank C naman uses SMS. And then here we have PDAX, a crypto exchange, using Google Authenticator. Now, the problem there is we don't have a standard, right? And if we don't have a standard, we cannot guarantee that each of these platforms have the same level of security. So that's also something that open finance will seek to do, no? By setting a standard, we can help ensure that the institutions that we're dealing with have a certain level of security standard. And at the same time, when they transmit our information to other banks or other institutions, it's done in a manner that the public, the regulators, and all the stakeholders deem to be safe.
Very good.
So ayun, napag-usapan yung na-mention mo yung open finance. So how much growth did you see with the number of Filipinos investing pag naging mainstream tong open finance sa atin, sir? And
right.
Yeah, how advantageous has open finance been in encouraging Filipinos to invest?
Right. Very good question. Now, certainly I'm in the crypto space where everything in crypto kasi is largely open, right? But I would point to something na historically we've experienced. No, there was a time when telcos were coming up that it was much easier to call someone from the same network, or much cheaper, right? Like kung Globe ka, Globe lang pwede mong tawagan. Kung smart ka, smart lang. Now, is it beneficial for consumers that if you're a Globe user, you can call a smart user? Of course, right? But we don't have the same but the movement among banks and financial institutions is not there yet, right? Right now, if your bank account is with Bank A, chances are everything is in Bank A. Yung credit card mo, yung home loan mo, yung UITF mo is also with Bank A. But open finance will actually help you have more options, right? And with more options, more people will be able to invest, more people will be able to access loans at the cheapest rate. And if you can access loans at a cheaper rate, guess what? The banks will be incentivized to compete so that loan rates become cheaper for everybody, right? So open finance is key, no, to encouraging competition as well as consumer protection.
So having said that, sir, ano yung magiging impact niya sa cryptocurrency in nation building in the future?
Mm-hmm. Right. So maybe I can clarify a little bit, no? Cryptocurrencies kasi right now, right? The only things we hear about are tumataas ang price ng Bitcoin, or nag-a-axie infinity yung kapitbahay ko, kumikita siya and all that. But cryptocurrencies have far-reaching use cases than just these, no? For example, PDAX since 2020 have been using blockchain technology to help the national government distribute bonds, no, in a much cheaper and safer manner. So I expect na by embracing open finance, investment products like tokenized securities or fractionalized shares, or even cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin can be made more accessible, not just to the select few, no, who know how to trade online, but also to more mainstream users of financial services?
Sir, halimbawa ako, what protection can I expect if I would invest in cryptocurrency?
Mhm.
And how can I repel or block potential breaches or attacks?
Very good question. I think whenever attacks or incidents like this happen, we love looking for people to blame, right? Dapat dapat yung government enforces these rules. Dapat yung BDO hindi ganyan yung hindi ganyan yung sistema, yung pamamalakad, etc. But the truth is we all play a very important role there, right? Yes, government has to have policies in place, which we do, right? We require the registration of a DPO, we require immediate reporting, and as far as the BSCB is concerned, there are standards that need to be achieved now by these institutions. But certainly we can do more, right? We can require more specific standards. Sa private sector naman, right? These institutions vary in the level of security practices, right? There are some who rely on on-premise systems, right? So may mga servers sila. There are some that are on the cloud, right? There are some who require just your basic credentials or a credit card, a debit card, and a PIN, while others require SMS, OTP, and other stuff, right? But certainly there is a best practice, right? So why isn't everybody conforming to the best practice? And now last, sa consumer naman, and probably this is the most important, right? Because it's very much in our control as consumers how we protect ourselves, right? Certainly, if we are being asked for our ATM pin, would we give that? Of course not, because we already know that the pin is for us. Well, the same is true for OTP. The same is true for your email credentials. And the same is true for pretty much everything you do online. No? So the first step really is how do you protect your credentials, right? Do you refresh your passwords? You should, because every now and then, hackers are able to collect passwords. And if you don't refresh yours, guess what? Madadali ka nila if they try to use your credentials. So, talaga, I like what Commissioner Deboro said earlier, na parang on the one hand, we're trying to strike a balance here on the government side, but actually also on the consumer side, there are a lot of that we can do to protect ourselves.
Mhm. Can I react to that?
Yes, sir. Yes, Commissioner.
Well, thank you, attorney, and thank you, Mr. Gaba. No, but really, again, since we're talking of a whole of society approach, and you've heard in the past few days about again, privacy and cybersecurity. One aspect of that is that it requires a lot of self-management. Right. The advice that we give people is that you don't give up your this
Commissioner Liboro,
technology.
I have to cut you first kasi napuputol ka. You don't have
All
a
right.
signal, I think. Napuputol.
All right. Sorry. Am I coming in now?
Ayan.
Am I coming better?
Yan, okay. Go on, sir.
All right. But just to again, it requires a lot of self-management. Diba? Who among you here have read actually a consent form or terms and conditions? Art, ikaw nga, expert na nga tayo, pero mapataklik ka pa rin di ba? Why? Kasi kailangan mo yung article Kailangan mo to So this is what we have to really be aware and really address. Diba? Kasi sabi ko nga, yung privacy and cyber self-management must be matched by a higher or greater accountability from banks or from those who process personal data. Because it is human nature to click and tap. It is our weakness na kapag binigyan ka, inoferan ka ng payong, magbibigay ka ng pangalan mo or something, di ba? But Is that a proof that we don't care for our privacy? No, not. But these are human weaknesses. These are human instincts. And businesses rely on this. They rely on people to input data. They rely on people to come up with passwords, right? So we are all relying on plain human instincts and weaknesses. And this open banking, this will flourish definitely because it's a human weakness for us to gather or to adopt what is convenient. So ang sa akin lang ano ko, Art, is, and to all here present, diba? And again, let me repeat it. The regulators, we are not the gatekeepers of what you can or cannot do. I mean, kung kami ang nagsasabi niyan, noong 2000, nung lumabas ang biometric technology, Art, which they thought was the most privacy intrusive technology then, at kung sinabi namin huwag gagamitin din, di ba? Ano nangyari na sa mundo, di ba? So hindi. So but what we expect you, but ano ba ang role namin? No? So kapag nangyayari na yan, people again are getting hurt. Di ba? Na silang tinatamaan, then again, no, government, no, is going back, no, we will protect the people. So it's now really the onus of controllers, banks, no, to come up with the right architecture to be able to deliver that kind of service. And I'm going back to Mr. Kapad, but in all this, and attorney, ano bang market intervention, hopefully, di ba? Well, no, yung sinasabi mo, Mr. Gaba, na bakit yung ibang kumpanya ginagawa ito, may ibang hindi. Ultimately, if the market will dictate, yung customer pupunta dun sa mga companies who've made cybersecurity and privacy a company differentiator. And we would expect that in the coming, di ba, kasabihin ng company A, dito na kayo sa akin kasi mas protektado ko kayo. I mean, that's the market intervening, no? So hopefully, with all this, di ba, yun yan, yung standards would know. Kasi for example, standard ba ang 10-year-old, naku, ito na, nahulog na yung aking ano. Alright. Example,
Standard ba ang 10-year-old?
Standard ba ang 10-year-old system that is about to be
Yes.
phased out? Yung ba standard, Art? I mean, that gets to be,
Yeah.
di ba? But ang bottom line kasi doon, systems are built for what? Di ba? May target ka ng, ng capacity. If you're built for 4 million depositors and you have 8 million depositors, then that begs to be asked, di ba? Paano nangyari yun? Your system was built for 4 million depositors and now you have 8. So something's got to give, right? So this is the deeper, again, so really now companies, yun din sasabi mo sa intro mo, must be at speed now, to be able to, sabi ko nga, hindi naman po, kapag ginawa mo na rin lahat, di ba, at nangyari pa rin yun, right? O di, wala tayong pinag-usapan, ika nga, di ba? Pero,
Thank you, sir. You can say all of these things now because you're now citizen mon.
tama ka.
Right? Anyway, we would like to acknowledge that we have more than 200 people watching us in our different platforms. MB Tech News page, the Digital
Wow.
Pilipinas Facebook page, and the FinTech Philippines Facebook page. We have a question here for Attorney Arvin. Attorney, the question is from Enzo Luna. He's a member of the media. Sabi niya, BDO has been hacked. So were some banks months or even years ago. The banks say they will put stronger systems in place, and maybe they have. But this keeps on happening. Now, a lot of account holders don't want to do online banking or have online accounts anymore. So how do we regain customer trust? Is it possible to regain customer trust?
Yes, I would go back to what I said earlier, Art, no, na there's no going back. Digital banking is here to stay. Now, how do we ensure that we do it in a safe manner? And I just have to laud what former commissioner mentioned earlier about the importance of accountability on the part of these institutions. And I would just also like to add to that, this concept of institutional courage, the idea that we need to know what happened insofar as it's not highly confidential or proprietary. And the reason behind that is that we need to get ahead of the game. We need to understand how can we better protect ourselves. So That's the more proactive stance that we are advocating. But also just to note, we actually have regulations. We have the proactive regulators that have issued regulations to ensure that we not only have the baseline protections, but also on top of that, what are the best industry practices? So ano ba yung mga examples nito? We have the section 148 of the Manual of Regulations for Banks, which sets out the information security risk management framework that banks have to comply with. Now, the question is, how does it stack up against recent incidents? And is there compliance that we can say more than enough and more than sufficiently protects the customer information? The other one would be siguro this part of the Data Privacy Act that doesn't get as much attention, right, as other provisions. And these are the security measures that have been laid down by the National Privacy Commission. In fact, they also issued very recently some advisory opinions on ISO and technical security standards that banks, and not only banks, actually all personal information controllers must comply with. So now we see a movement not only towards actually putting in place regulations, but specifying ano ba yung mga technical security measures. And the call for now for everyone here is to understand how do we comply with this industry best practices and how do we standardize them so that it's applicable for everyone. So obviously consumers, they have to protect their information, it goes without saying, and consumer awareness can take care of that. But at the end of the day, the onus really does fall on the controllers, on the banks, on the processors to make sure that we do what we can, right, based on the highest technical possible security standards, right, to ensure that consumers' trust is retained, consumer trust is developed.
Follow-up question. Additional question pala. This time from Rafi Pedrahita.
Yes,
to
please.
Attorney Arvin again. So, going back to the video incident, how can we assess the damage from a data privacy perspective? The ones who are affected, whose bank accounts have been hacked, how can they retain protection? How can they be protected? Or are they forever vulnerable? Their data sent by the hackers to the dark web.
Yeah, so ito yung forward-looking approach, right, and perspective that we need to espouse, which is that how can we assure that this does not happen again? And this is a good thing because we see that, not only consumers but also data protection officers like the one that raised the question are already thinking ahead as to what we can do, right? And this is very, very helpful as we become DPOs on the side of personal information controllers or companies. So this just goes to show that we already have the right mindset, right? But what can we do? First of all, more transparency, more information, again, in the spirit of open finance and collaboration, insofar as it can be possibly shared. So again, it takes institutional courage to really say what happened, right? What went on. And that's really the first step so that everyone else can protect themselves. So is it, as I mentioned, there are two scenarios. Is it the first scenario? Is it the second scenario? And once we have identified that scenario, that's when we can trace where did the information go? Did it go to the deepest corners of the dark web? And how can we remove it from there? And obviously that requires also cooperation between the DPOs and the information security officers within organizations and across organizations, meaning having that sense of community and helping each other to understand and having a united stance, right, to finally put an end to these kinds of things from happening again.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. For Mr. Gaba, sir, baka masagot mo to. OTP via SMS is one of the most insecure methods. Why isn't it being phased out? Palagay nyo. Di ba? It's more insecure, most insecure.
Well, so actually my background is not as technical, no? So for sure, I'm not in a position to explain what makes SMS less secure. But certainly there are better ways to generate one-time passwords or one-time pins. But whenever companies adopt new technology or new tools, there are always trade-offs, right? If we want something to be extremely secure, they might provide a physical device, right, that generates a pin, right? But then the device is inconvenient, right? Consumers don't want that. Baka mawala pa nila. They're also more expensive because banks will have to procure that and provide it to the customer. Now, SMS certainly is something that's very accessible, right? We all have mobile phones. We can all receive texts, even in areas na medyo mahina yung data, right? And not everyone has real-time access to the internet also, right? So there are these trade-offs, no? Na security certainly is a primary consideration, but perhaps because in light of this incident, the trade-off dynamics will change, right? Perhaps we would be weighing security a little bit more in the organization rather than maybe a little bit the consumer experience or the commercial benefits. Okay, so I expect institutions will start making those trade-offs, and we should expect to see some change perhaps.
Tapos sir, Michelle, cryptocurrency advocates say that among the strengths of the system is the transparency, high level of accountability. Na machi-check daw ng user yung transactions, trace them, and view all the data about the said transaction. But does that kind of widespread transparency not make the users and their data vulnerable as well?
So you know what's interesting is not all cryptocurrencies are the same, right? So probably the person speaking there is talking about Bitcoin, where you can really access all the transactions publicly. There are no names there, right? It doesn't say Art Samaniego transfers 50 Bitcoins. Hindi naman ganun. But it would be your wallet address. Now, the security or the consumer benefit in such an openness is not because it's publicly inspectable, but because we all know and understand that if you transact here, mind you, nasa blockchain yung record dun, and so it's fair, right? Now, okay, we all use Facebook, right? We all like stuff, we all share posts, etc. But do we know how Facebook is using our information sa back end? We don't. It's not transparent. And so Bitcoin is transparent in that you know exactly what's going to be published out there and that it's fair. You can prepare to control what you broadcast to the world, and you can then protect yourself.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Citizen Mon. Thank you, Attorney Arvin. And thank you, Mr. Gaba. That was a wonderful discussion. It establishes the road ahead and what we collectively have to do to make our nation's cyber defense a formidable one. Now, we'd like you to share your final thoughts on our discussion. We'll start with former Commissioner Mon Liboro. Sir, final thoughts and
Thank you, Art. Sabi ko nga, tayo hindi na, kung tayo nasa typhoon belt, hindi natin maalis. Tayo rin, nandito na. And let me just make a clarion call. I mean, COVID has been, this is one of the, I would say, na kung nakikita natin, COVID has accelerated digitalization. 6 years ago, may question nun, Sir Art, di ba? Are the masses ready for two-factor authentication? Ganyan, And now they're more than ready kasi nandun na, telepono lahat, nagde-data na lahat. And look at this recent phenomenon. It's very, and I must admit, it's really a tester. Because when you look at the, even yung scam text, di ba? It went through data aggregators. It was sent through SMS, which is again a very vulnerable, decrepit way. Often, but it was ultimately they had to transfer to a messenger platform and then an online platform. Ang daming platforms ang dinaanan just to get money from the one de la Cruz. So we're in an age now where this has really accelerated. Our people are in very dire straits. We all plan to recover, and in doing so, right, more companies would push the envelope in coming up with products and services that will also make them bounce back, diba? So there will be aggressive marketing, there will be aggressive offering of services, there will be aggressive introduction of new ways again. So, and ranged against a population that is again trying to recover from all this. We're all vulnerable, right? Vulnerable po ang mga kababayan natin. Kaya kailangan po talaga tayo ay magsama-sama, matulungan po sila sa mga panahon.
Thank you, sir. Now, Mr. Gaba, please.
Yeah, certainly, what we're experiencing here is nothing new in the sense that whenever new technology comes, the entire ecosystem has to react to take advantage of the new technology and to take advantage of the technology in such a way that it's safe, right? Maybe if we simplify the situation a little bit, no? Certainly today we all wear seatbelts, right? But there was a time that cars were around na walang seatbelt, right? Now, it's not the LTO's job to invent the seatbelt, but it's their job or the MMDA's job to ensure that everyone's wearing seatbelts, right? As consumers, tayo, it's our job to actually use it. Diba? So now let's maybe keep that keep that framework in mind, because there's nothing wrong with innovation, and there's also nothing wrong with having the stakeholders, the consumer, the institutions, and the regulators working together to solve problems as they come, right? So let's keep that in mind, and be ready that as more and more as we adopt technology more and more into our daily lives, we are also still just figuring out how best to protect the entire ecosystem. Okay, so certainly this incident was probably not the first, right, in such security incidents, and will likely not be the last. But the important thing is that we take the lessons that we can from this incident, and perhaps use that to create or design better protections going forward.
Thank you, sir. And now, Attorney Arvin, please.
Yes, I would like to thank my co-panelists, Commissioner Liboro and Michelle Gaba, for their very brilliant insights. And I would also just like to say that this is only the start of the story on how we can collaborate further with each other as an industry. Open finance, what does it mean? It means collaboration, transparency, working each other to find solutions to achieve financial inclusion, to help better the lives of everyone. And the way that we're seeing this story unfold, right? With consumer activism in play, this means that people are increasingly guarding and calling for accountability. We see the regulators acting very quickly on this matter. The BSP has formed a task force, and we are awaiting further information on that. The NPC has made its position clear and is in fact on the side of the data subjects or the consumers. And we also know that BDO has reimbursed a certain segment of people who were affected. And now we are just confident, and we really, really hope that they can continue in the step towards the right direction. It takes institutional courage to really share what happened and for us to be more comfortable and to continue to have that consumer trust in these institutions. And I'm confident that people here will do the right things to guard our financial information.
Thank you, sir. Maraming salamat po sa inyong lahat. Cybersecurity is a collective decision and calls for collaboration if it is to become successful. Gaya na sinasabi ko lagi, being a victim of a cybercrime is like having the COVID-19. It is not only us who would be affected if we were tricked into clicking that malicious link or sharing that OTP sent to us via SMS. Pati mga pamilya natin, relatives, and friends will also become targets and would be greatly affected if we will not take care of our online hygiene. Let us all be cyber secure and cyber safe this Christmas season. We would like to thank everyone, our panelists and our audience, for attending this very informative session. Let's look forward to a happier, safer Christmas and cyber stronger New Year. May we invite Amor? Nandito na si Amor for a photo op. Photo op daw muna tayo.
All right.
Ayan.
Thank you, everyone. Okay, 1, 2, 3. All right, one more po. All right, 1, 2, 3. Maraming salamat.
Send me a copy, ha?
Holidays. See you
Citizen
guys.
Mall,
Thank you,
we'll be
everyone.
working together.
Thanks, Commissioner Art, Michelle. Bye-bye.
Bye guys.
Attorney
See you
Arvin,
Amor.
in
dami
person.
pang tanong
guys.
sa'yo.
Amor, thank you.
Let's talk
Thank you,
offline.
po.
Thank you,
God
everyone.
bless you. God
Thank
bless
you.
you, Commissioner Libor, for all your
All right.
service.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you very
Attorney
much.
Arvin,
Nice meeting
salamat.
you all.
Axel, Oo,
Thank you, Kong
salamat.
Liboro. Thank you very much. Art, let's just communicate. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right,
Yes, sir.
bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Attorney.
Bye-bye, Art.